Lima in Rio, and they'll be staring into their smartphones to try and orient themselves. And what everybody notices is they come out of a tube station or they get off a bus or they're in an odd town, they pull out their smartphone and they get lost at that point.
Will Self on the joys, the magic of GPS. So Greg Milner, you've written all about the technology. Is that a description of GPS that you recognise?
Oh, absolutely. I think he hits on something really, really smart and key about GPS, and that it tells you where you are, but if you want, you can isolate that knowledge and not have any idea of where you are in relation to other things.
And as for GPS's history, I suppose we can trace it back to the military in the case of the global positioning system itself, isn't it? So where does the story start?
Well, it's sort of distant origins go all the way back to Sputnik, but the GPS program itself really began in the early 70s, and it was spearheaded by an Air Force colonel named Brad Parkinson, who's really what he saw in such a system as a way to conduct a more humane sort of warfare. Like a lot of supporters of GPS in the Air Force, he had been involved in Vietnam and the Vietnam War and seen the air campaigns and how they were basically, there was no precision whatsoever, and he thought it was really, kind of atrocious. So his idea, the phrase he used to use was he wanted to develop something that could drop 5 bombs in the same hole so that you could really drop bombs exactly where you wanted them. And so that was really how GPS began as a military project to wage air warfare.
And is it just a myth that if the US military wants to, it could either switch GPS off and doom us all, or at the very least limits the accuracy of GPS?
Well, to the first one, it could certainly turn it off. The odds of that happening are almost nil. At this point, it'd be an act of such gross irresponsibility that, there's no way I think that would ever happen. They can make it, somewhat less accurate for the rest of us. There's 2 GPS signals, really. There's the military signal and the civilian signal. And actually, for many years, until about 2000, they disrupted the civilian signal a little bit so that it wasn't quite as accurate as it could otherwise be, because they were worried about people having the same accuracy as the military, and they were worried about the implications of that. So yeah, those 2 things, it could certainly do those things.
Right. Bill Thompson, what have you taken away from this book?
Its importance for the sugar beet harvest. Actually,
Agricultural use.
there are so many unexpected things in here, but the fact that you can use GPS in combination with GLONASS, the Russian system, to plant your sugar beet to within a centimetre, fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest growing parts of the GPS economy, in fact, is precision agriculture techniques. Farmers are finding that it's pretty much indispensable in terms of how efficient it makes the process of farming.
But of course, it's not all good news for GPS, so we have to go back to Will Self. He has an example of GPS kind of taking us backward rather than forward. I mean going back in time in this case, not necessarily in space.
A few years ago, I flew to Dubai, walked across Dubai for a couple of days and directly into the empty quarter, into the desert of Arabia. I only went about 15 miles out into the desert, but such is the condition of modern mapping now that there was no paper map available that was of the right scale for a walk of that kind. In other words, the GPS technology had delivered Dubai and its inhabitants back to the condition they were in when Wilfred Thesiger was the first European to travel up that coast and actually start surveying it for mapping.
So, Will Self again. Greg Milner, you also write a whole chapter about death by GPS, just pointing out some of the really terrible things that happen when people perhaps rather blindly followed their GPS units, which is the standout example for you.
Well, the biggest example, the one that I think actually the standout example are people, the couple who drove to Capri when they wanted to drive to the Italian town of Carpi, or the woman in Belgium who drove all the way to Croatia because she was just following GPS too much. The more common ones, the more mundane ones, are people like a couple I read about in detail in the book, from the Canadian couple who very innocently followed GPS when they were on their way to Las Vegas, and they wound up in some of the most remote parts of the United States, and really got themselves in trouble and went missing because nobody knew where they were.
And that speaks to your point which you make about the loss of our cognitive maps, that we're not listening to ourselves when we use GPS.
Absolutely. I mean, the cognitive map is what psychologists and cognitive scientists refer to when they talk about the innate sense of navigation and wayfinding that we all have. And there have been studies, but all of us know anecdotally from using GPS and when we navigate through a strange area that it really kind of makes you not have to use that
You're
part of
right,
your brain at all.
Greg. We're going to have to leave it there. Greg Milner, thanks very much. The producer's Colin Grant.